So let's look closely here at a few different parts and make sure you understand what they are. And this is a little laborious, but some of this is really important. This little roller thing here goes around like that. That's the thrust bearing. So the blade itself is pushed back against that when you're cutting wood, and this outside here is able to spin with the blade as the blade goes by, so that the blade doesn't wear badly against some other metal piece, a fixed metal piece. It's going to be adjusted so that it should be right behind the blade, and if the blade is pushed back against it, then this part starts to turn around the center. These little wood, metal blocks here, the guide blocks, then are spaced so there's just enough room in between the blade and the inside of those blocks. There's one like this on either side, and the blade rides right between them. These little adjustment knobs back here for the thrust bearing and for the guide should be preset by the teacher, and students shouldn't have to touch these. Students sometimes grab these thinking that they're going to be how they adjust the guard and those other things, but most of the time those should be right. If they're not right, you should find the teacher and get me to adjust it, as opposed to trying to work on them yourself. Of course, we know this is the blade right here. You can see the teeth right on the front edge of the blade there, and if you look closely, those teeth should be basically pointing downwards towards the table. We talked about the table insert right here. I can I can pull it out if I want to, and we'll need to do that to change the blade and do other things. Most of the time, it'll just stay right there where it is. I get it back in there, you get the idea, and that's the way that works. This cut right here in the table, see how there's a groove cut right here? It kind of goes all the way out to the edge of the table. That's what allows us to insert a new blade when we have to do that. Okay, this guy in the front here, that's the actual blade guard, so that it sits out here and provides a safe protection for the front edge of the blade here, and as we talked about before, minimizes the amount of blade that's exposed where you can get hurt on it. We'll move the camera now and come around here to the back a little bit and make sure you're clear on what part does what, and I want to make sure that you adjust the right parts and not the others. So this post here is the guide post. That is fastened here inside this collar, and it holds this whole assembly in place. When it's time to raise and lower the guard and the guide, the whole assembly here, you undo this knob right here. Don't mess with the little knobs there. Don't mess with these little knobs down here. These are for adjusting the thrust bearing and the blade guide. These are the locking knobs. The other knobs we saw before were for moving the blade guide and the thrust bearing back and forth. These lock them in place. Those, you should just leave them alone. If there's a problem with those, find the teacher. But here we have this handle. When we loosen that handle, that allows this whole thing to slide up and down. Okay, that's the one you should be working on, and be sure that it may be a little hard to turn. You're gonna have to put a little oomph onto it to make it go down like this, and then getting it to the right place, and get it to the proper height you want, and snug it up nice, and then it'll stay in place while you're working. Okay, so that's the adjustment knob for the height of the guard and guide assembly. Now let's look underneath the saw just for a minute. We go down here. We should be able to see the table locking clamps, or the tilt angle locking clamps. There's one in the front and one in the back. So this one here, right here, and this one back here allows us to tilt the table. So if I reach in here and loosen these like that, now I can tilt the table, okay, and get it to whatever position I want. Generally, when I come back up to the stop position right there, it's at the angle indicator here will be at 0. I can tighten this up if that's what I want, or any angle in between. Keep it nice and tight. Most of the time, students won't need to change those, but if you do, you need to get some help from the teacher and make sure you're doing it properly. okay? We saw the upper and lower wheel guards, upper and lower wheel. That's all fine. Also, the switch here, as I mentioned before, it's got this little plastic rim around here. So in order to hit the start button, you really have to make a concerted effort to reach inside here and hit it. The stop button, you can just whack it with your hand, and that's, of course, a safety feature. It should be a lot easier to stop it than to start it. And we know that it's going to continue to coast for a while after we stop it. So let's run it for a second and see that. Hopefully you can see the teeth moving by on the blade. Now when I stop it, slower, slower, slower. We're going to wait several seconds, and finally, now it's stopped. We could reach in and clear chips and stuff. As I was talking about, it's really easy for chips to get caught down in this groove right here and get in the way of you continuing to make cuts. So you may have to stop it, clear those out, and even sometimes take this out and reach down inside here and clear out the chips that get caught in between the blade and the lower guide blocks. Okay, but be sure to put this back in before you start cutting again, and again, you know, letting the blade come to a complete stop before you ever reach in close like that. You know, upper and lower wheel. Look here a little more closely inside here at the wheels. You have a nice big bearing inside here that allows the wheel to spin. Okay, and the same thing on the bottom. The bottom wheel is the one that's powered in the back of the saw. There's the motor and the belt and everything. It turns the lower wheel. The lower wheel turns the upper wheel just by being connected with the bandsaw, the blade, right? And you can see here where that's blade. The blade is actually running through that back guard right there. It's a little hard to see that on the video, I'm afraid. That's keeping that part of the blade covered for the most part, so it's really hard to get hurt there. Okay, once in a while we'll do, you know, good clean out. We clean up the machine every day. Sometimes we get inside of these parts here and run the vacuum cleaner and clean out sawdust that accumulates inside the guards. But most of the time, we just leave the guards closed. Okay. Oh, there is a device called a miter gauge. It lives over here on the wall. Let's get that. And that can allow us to make cuts this way. The miter gauge fits. Let's zoom out a little bit. Miter gauge fits right there and slides along here, and thus this big square groove in the table is called the miter gauge groove. See, that's sliding through there. We can hold the wood up against this and push it through the blade that way. If the guard is up high enough, it allows it to slide right through. Okay, and you can change the angle on the miter gauge if you're trying to measure a certain angle cut and go like that. That'll allow you to do that. One other thing we'll see is the rip fence. Let's grab one of those. This guy right here. That's a rip fence. Let's take a look. Now I'll need to, the only saws this works on are the ones that have the proper mounting brackets. So the saw I've been showing you doesn't have that. This saw here does. Let's back out just a little bit and see it. See these attachments right here on the table, this one here and this one here, allows this fence to attach there. And we bring this along here and work carefully to adjust it where we want. We would measure and get it just right, just the right distance from the blade. Then tighten up this knob here, tighten up this knob here, and that will hold the fence securely there. Now you can use that as a guide to run your wood through this way. If you're cutting a thinner piece of wood that makes it dangerous to reach your hand inside here, Then you would use a push block or a small piece of wood that's narrow and allows you to push it with a piece of wood on top of your workpiece to slide through adjacent to the rip fence. So the rip fence, this guy over here is the miter gauge, and this square recess here is called the miter gauge groove, going through the table right there. Okay, thank you for watching. Please be sure to memorize all these important parts of the machine, as you'll be responsible for those on the test.